Funding for the Civil War is provided by General Motors and its Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, Cadillac, GMC truck divisions, and GMAC. General Motors, committed to excellence. Funding is also provided by the National Endowment, which supports scholarship, research, education, and public programs. Also the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, and by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation.
The Civil War will continue in a few moments.
Thursday night. Join host Meryl Streep for the premiere episode of Race to Save the Planet. Then, the stakes are high
I need to meet you, Mr. Poirot. This is a national emergency.
as Hercule Poirot returns for an intriguing game of military intelligence.
The only person who could possibly have stolen those most important papers is one of us.
Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot on Mystery, Thursday night on public television's Showcase Week. Friday night.
The crisis is George Bush's biggest test. Meanwhile, the economy continued to limp along on one wing. They obviously see their own necks on the line here.
Now, more than ever, Washington Week in Review, followed by Wall Street Week.
Welcome to the 90s, folks, and bring some cash.
Friday night. Then,
You mean it's all a cappella? Nice.
Spike Lee. Debbie Allen.
I love you, 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 I love you.
Great music. Spike and Company do it a cappella on Great Performances, Friday, October 5th on public television's Showcase Week.
Public Television, WITF-TV, Harrisburg.
The Civil War continues.
We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are
Major corporate funding for the Civil War was provided by General Motors and its almost 800,000 employees in 38 countries. General Motors committed to excellence in quality products and television programming. Funding was also provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities, which supports scholarship, research, education, and public programs. Also the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, and by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation.
For information about purchasing video cassettes of The Civil War, call 1-800-424-7963 or write to PBS Video.
This is PBS.
Call 1-800-441-3000 to order your companion book to the Civil War series called The Civil War, An Illustrated History. Published by Alfred A. Knopf and written by Jeffrey C. Ward with Rick Burns and Ken Burns. The price is $50 plus handling.
Ken, Shelby Foote says that the Civil War was the defining experience of a nation. So, what are we defined as that we weren't before?
Changed everything. Someone said that American history was this clear stream that ran into this bloody lake called the Civil War and ran out clear again. Everything that came before it led up to it. Everything since has been a consequence of it. As Shelby said at the beginning of this, the last episode of the film, that before the war people said the United States are, plural, a union. After the war we said, and we still say, the United States is singular, which is actually ungrammatical. We used the phrase union up to the war, and afterwards we began to use this other idea called a nation. Abraham Lincoln uses it in the Gettysburg Address. We became one. This is the terrible, terrible, poignant paradox of this thing, that in order to become one, we tore ourselves apart. And the Civil War reverberates with that today. I mean, if I told you that I was working on a film about an imperial presidency, about a sometimes intrusive press, about incompetent generals, about Wall Street speculators who stole millions by trading inside information, about military contractors that sold the government shoddy goods at inflated prices, about a developing women's movement, about a continual civil rights question, on and on, about flag desecration, about internal secession. I could be talking about now, and I was talking about the Civil War. It's past, and yet it's with us today, defining almost every step we take in a way.
That's marvelous. But we are changed. Those symptoms you list boggle the mind, but we are a different people in a sense, aren't we? The unity is taken for granted, and we work within it. What's different?
Well, we're completely different. It made us this one thing. It told us that we were Americans and not just Northerners and Southerners. There is, as Sam Watkins has read so well by Charlie McDowell, no north or south, east or west anymore. The compass just points up and down. This is what it did to us. It brought the country together, and yet so many of the divisions that were present then are still present now. We postponed so many things. After having murdered 620,000 of our own family members, we then turned around and started overlaying this thing with this myth that made it impossible to really recapture the very thing for which we had fought, which was to extend to all citizens this initial promise that all were created equal. And so we struggle still with these divisions and difficulties.
Barbara Fields makes a point of that, of course, and she almost ends it on the question, who won the Civil War? Implies, is it over? Suggests, maybe not.
You can say there's no such thing as slavery anymore. We're all citizens.
But if we're all citizens, then we have a task to do to make sure that that, too, is not a joke. If some citizens live in houses and others live on the street, the Civil War is still going on. It's still to be fought, and regrettably, it can still be lost.
I think one of my favorite moments in the film is her struggling with that question and the sense that, as Faulkner reminds us and she recalls, that history is not was, but is, that our consideration of the Civil War now raises all the questions that it did, that it's no accident that we're doing this film now. The country is anxious to find out about what happened during the Civil War, and we have books and we have feature films of glory and things that remind us of this important chapter. Who won the war? The North won it, as she said, but we've also lost so much as a result of it. We have not fulfilled the promises that we made in the end of the war. It's a question that I struggle with now. In fact, it's almost that question that animated the pursuit in this film, and yet has to, in some ways, remain open. It has to be an open question.
Let me oversimplify it. If the war was about slavery, which I was not taught in the South, I was sort of taught that was a contributory reason, but mainly it was about industrial society versus agrarian, and those people that want to take away states' rights, whatever that was. And slaves were sort of drifted through it. The side that would abolish slavery won. It took the freed slaves 100 years to get to the doorstep of equality. So in a sense, it does go on.
Well,
that part of it.
If we accept that it is this defining moment, that there's some incredible struggle that is set in motion in this conflict, and if everything that came before it led up to it, then this idea of all men are created equal is not a given. It is a quest. And if we look at the history of our country, it's a tension between growth and civil rights. And we're constantly trying to enlarge the definition and the meaning of all men are created equal. The Civil War murdered hundreds of thousands of people to extend it to black men, and we've extended it to women and black women and immigrants. And now we're struggling with the handicapped and homosexuals and how we try to enlarge and invigorate an American democracy. So the Civil War is constantly being fought, and I doubt in this American pageant it will ever stop being fought. You know, I mean, this is our great struggle. We are stuck with it in a way.
Well, maybe there's hope in, well, there's a lot of hope just inherent in this, but along with this thing lasting and casting itself on through the years, what amazes me after watching your film, really, is how fast a great deal of reconciliation took place. I was reminded watching these last episodes that at Appomattox, the Great Surrender, Lee had to remind Grant that Lee had come to surrender. Yes. They were so filled with respect for each other. I made some notes as it went on. The terms, which could have been harsh, were simply reasonable. They were like people who had been brothers and would be, treating each other with respect. That incredible touch of Joshua Chamberlain calling the federal troops to salute the surrendering Confederates, that's moving stuff. If you made that up in a novel, I'd say he's overdoing it. He's overdoing it. Joshua Chamberlain knew it was right and knew to do it. The expressions of mutual respect, the day of the surrender, and every reunion thereafter, these murderous soldiers killing each other as people had never been killed on earth, it turns out did have respect.
Yes, throughout. This is the thing about the Civil War that makes it so extraordinary. Shelby, at the very beginning of the series, says an amazing thing, which is sort of a guide. He says, we like to think of ourselves as uncompromising people, us Americans, but our genius is for compromise. we were a country that was struggling for the 80 and a few years to just work it out. And all of a sudden it didn't work out. And in this terrible explosion we went to war, but we hadn't forgot the larger things that connected us, the connections of family, literally, of blood, of religion, of geography, Chamberlain's gesture, Grant's generosity, Lee's understanding. All of those sorts of things conspire to make this country extraordinary and to be an example to a world that was poised to say, what will happen to this form known as popular government? Will it just disintegrate inevitably as experiments were doing? The French Revolution, other things. Can it survive? And Abraham Lincoln said, yes, it can, it must. And others did too, and others in the South as well. We cannot see this always as a bitter loss, but in fact, a victory for popular government, as Stephen Knight says. And that is a great, decisive answer when we say, who won the Civil War? The United States of America won the Civil War. We are one.
Sum up. Say something that's never been said about Abraham Lincoln.
I get involved with my subjects. And it's very difficult to consider the Civil War without being aware of the extraordinary contribution of this man, the greatest president we have ever had, without a doubt, in my belief.
Mine too.
But I have to believe one of the greatest human beings that has ever walked, to be blessed with his ability to bring the English language together, to communicate to his people, to see much greater than the current struggle, to be a flawed man, to be a difficult man, to be all of those things, and yet is, to me, overwhelming. He's the most complicated, most wonderful, most important person I have ever gotten to know. There was a moment in our mix when we were finishing the soundtrack for this film, when at the assassination, where we hadn't laid down the shot of the gun at Ford's Theater. We'd laid down the narration and the music and the sound of the play chattering on in the background, but we hadn't laid down on several tracks the sound of the bullets that we had. And the mixer was running it towards this inevitable murder, and we suddenly, the editor and my assistant Lynn Novick and I, said, stop. And for a moment, we froze the assassination. We didn't kill him. And we stood with tears flowing down our cheeks and stopped to consider that momentary power that we had. And then we moved on, backed up, laid down the shot, finished the film, and went home before Christmas. And I will never, as long as I live, forget the moment when we, for a moment, saved Abraham Lincoln.
Ken Burns, thank you for all of us. And as my very Southern grandmother used to say, bless all our hearts.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks to the members of WITF and the following business for supporting today's programming. A community bank proud to be sharing in the preservation of local heritage with restorations such as the banking office in Marietta, the General Sutter House in Lidditz, completed in 1980, and now the Morgan Mills in adaptive restoration, restoring a once proud building to new productivity. Farmers First, a community bank, proud to support public broadcasting on WITF. 232-2111 is the phone number that connects you with our message recording reaction line. We value your comments on the program you've just seen, so call us and tell us what you thought about it. 232-2111. Call and record your opinion. 232-2111 now.
Support more programs like The Civil War. Call this number. It costs $5. And with a touch-tone phone, take our special Civil War quiz and test what you know about the blue and the gray. It's fun and it's challenging. And if we stump you on any questions, we'll give you the right answers. So it's a very smart way to show how much you value this station and series like the Civil War. Take the challenge. Call our number and call often. And we can all look forward to a future of great TV.
After 15 years of reporting on the state of the world, Lester Brown has reached a hard conclusion.
We are, in fact, part of an environmentally unsustainable global economy.
Next time on A World of Ideas.
Watch it on Channel 33 at 11 o'clock tonight.
Berlin. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Bernstein. Join us for this historic concert of Beethoven's immortal celebration of brotherhood and freedom. Leonard Bernstein conducts an international orchestra and chorus from the Schauspielhaus in East Berlin. Bernstein in East Berlin on PBS.
Stereo simulcast with public radio Friday at 9. This is Public Television Channel 33, WITF-TV, Harrisburg.
These Japanese had us in a clear field of fire. They were holding up our attack. Someone had to knock them out of there. I was a pro, so it was my job to do it.
What one soldier thinks of as doing his duty, his superiors sometimes cite as an act of gallantry, above and beyond the call of duty, an action that merits our country's highest military award. Only 430 of the more than 16 million Americans who served in World War II gained such recognition. Among them, a company commander leading a charge against entrenched Japanese pillboxers on Iwo Jima, a pilot trying to bring his shattered B-17 home safely, and a Navy ace picking enemy planes out of the sky. 3 men risking their lives to serve their country. 3 heroes whose actions earned them the Congressional Medal of Honor. By early 1944, the Army Air Corps was challenging the heart of the German Empire. In daytime bombing raids, our B-17 crews pounded the toughest military and industrial targets in the Third Reich. One American pilot, 26-year-old Edward Michael, a high school dropout from Chicago, had a special incentive.
I was a no-striper on KP duty at Wheeler Field in Hawaii the day the Japs attacked Pearl. They almost got me.